Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Educator Violence Prevention and Response Strategies for ESPs presentation tonight. Tonight, I will be presenting, and again, my name is Crystal Fox, and I'm a Senior Policy and Program Specialist with our ESP Quality Department and also with our Health and Safety Department. I focus on topics related to school safety and building safe school cultures like trauma-informed practices and restorative practices and social emotional learning. And my co-presenter tonight is Dr. Sisler Russ. I will let her introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Dr. Sisler Russ, and I have been in education for about 24 years. I specialize in climate and culture in the schoolhouse, and I'm so happy to be here to help, discuss and talk about some of the other things that I work with in regards to relationships and building and strengthening relationships to strengthen the school culture. Thank you.
Right, next slide.
Next slide. Our objectives for tonight: the nature of violence against educators, defining workplace violence, considerations for ESPs, and prevention strategies that build positive relationships and communication. Next slide. All right, so we have a little poll here. Um, we would like for you to put your response in the chat. Violence against educators. Here's the poll question. What group of educators report experiencing the most incidents of violence in the workplace? They're coming in. All right, great job. We're seeing those responses coming in nice and fast.
Yes. All right. So we'll go ahead and Jessica, if you can get to the next slide. So, as many of you guessed, I could see a lot of these responses and a lot of great responses in the chat. So I see paras, teachers, security staff. So mostly paras and security staff, ESPs. So correct. So according to the American Psychological Association study on educator violence, school support staff experience the highest rates of student physical violence, with 22% of staff reporting at least one incident of physical violence during COVID. And so this study really is a widely used survey from the American Psychological Association. They surveyed over 14,000 educators, and those educator groups included education support professionals, teachers, administrators, and specialized support professionals. And so, as you can see, the research shows that although we most often, hear about acts of violence between staff and students, it's also between staff and other staff members and staff and or parent and community members. So reported acts of violence against educators can also range from physical assault to intense physical and verbal aggression as well. And that can also include ongoing abuse. So just to give you a little background on kind of the nature of the violence against educators. Next slide. So when it comes to defining violence against educators, we've talked about, a little bit of the statistics and the nature versus is it pertains to who are the parties in the incidents, whether it's students and educators or parents and educators or educators versus educators. When it comes to policy and legislation, violence against educators is often documented and defined as what we refer to as workplace violence. So, workplace violence definitions can also vary amongst agencies and employers. They can be all-encompassing and include verbal and physical violence, or even written threats. So as you can see, there are two definitions that I've given on the slide here, and these examples are provided from the CDC and also the U.S. Department of Labor. And as you can see, they're slightly different. The CDC's definition is broader, and it doesn't specify intent or types of harassment and abusive behavior, while the Department of Labor's definition is a little bit more specific, and it also includes intimidation. So why is this important? This is important because how workplace violence is defined within your state or your school division will be key for you to understand your rights. And any incidents of injury or workplace violence are covered by district policies. They may meet the definition or they may not. So if you're engaging in an incident and something happens, and it could be violence defined as violence against educators per the research, but if your policies are different, then it may not be covered by procedures and processes in your school division. Next slide. So the nature of violence being experienced by educators has raised a lot of concern related to personal injury, incident reporting, accountability, and also professional development needs and school safety measures. So for instance, when we talk about injuries, any injuries that are sustained during an act of violence incident can range in severity, and they can also become permanent. Incident reporting can present an area of concern because processes can be complicated and cumbersome, and often most employees don't know where the forms are or even receive some training on those procedures. Our discipline policies as well are area of concern because understanding student accountability, especially, and how the acts of violence are addressed in the code of conduct can be an area of concern for our educators. Also in professional development, there are areas that sometimes that we are not always covered, or we have to advocate for, like prevention and response strategies around workplace violence. And Dr. Russ will also be talking about that a little bit later as well. And also with security and school safety measures. So knowing what your crisis planning looks like and protective equipment if needed. And so these are areas of concern that often come up when we talk about workplace violence or in different studies around workplace violence in our research. So with all of these concerns, acts of workplace violence can also take not just a physical toll on our ESPs and other educators, but also an emotional toll that can really impact our ESP retention and recruitment. And policies and resources that are needed to address these issues should be holistic and provide all of our educators with support and resources that really pertain to your physical injuries and also mental health and how you can access school safety and behavior support resources as well. Next slide. So when we talk about considerations, I mean, we've discussed the nature of educator violence and these areas of concern, but what are the factors really that ESPs should consider in an event of an incident or in preparation of an incident? So these considerations can help you to create a plan for how you can respond and prevent workplace violence. And there are also several areas that encompass the various concerns that we've discussed tonight, but we're going to focus on four main areas. And those four areas of consideration will be around policies and procedures, data collection, incident reporting, and even injuries. Next slide. So when we talk about district policies and procedures, it's important for us to know exactly what those policies are and where they're located. I don't know about you, but in my experience as an educator, every district I've gone to has had different policies, and those policies are often located with different departments and so on. And so just like workplace violence definitions can vary amongst employers, so can your local policies and procedures. So knowing your policies and procedures is critical for you to understand your rights and what resources you can access. And so depending on the policies, you may or may not be able to access things like workers' comp, medical leave, and employee assistance programs. Next slide. So some things to think about as look-fors. So again, knowing where those district policies and forms are located. So that includes who should you contact? What departments support workplace violence? Your contacts could be your school health and safety team if you have one on site. Also, it could be HR personnel, or it could be your administrator. Sometimes when it comes to workplace violence incident reporting, especially if there are injuries involved, that could be coordinated through your school nurse. So it's important to know who you should contact and where those policies are located in order to streamline the process for yourself so that you can get the care and resources that you need. And then also, how is workplace violence defined? And so we talked about that again, those definitions can vary. So, for example, you could be in a school division that does not define verbal threats as workplace violence. And maybe verbal threats is covered under harassment or bullying policies. In those cases, you definitely want to know how workplaces violence is defined, because then you will know what processes and procedures to follow. And then what are the policies and procedures in place for incident reporting? We'll discuss incident reporting a little bit further, but knowing what the reporting policies are, who you report to, and what types of forms that you should fill out are very key in getting the supports that you need. Are there required workplace violence and safety trainings as well in your school division that you should be aware of? And then trainings, everyone should really have access to policy and mitigation training. So you definitely want to make sure that you check with your human resources department to ensure that ESPs have access to any required workplace violence trainings and any safety de-escalation training as well. And so knowing that all of these things kind of encompass your policies and procedures, these are some items that we think that you should just kind of keep in mind as you are making yourself more familiar with your district policies. Next slide. So another consideration, if you are involved in a workplace violence incident, is data collection. So does your school division collect workplace violence data? So when you access your school district incident or injury data, it can assist you in understanding the nature of violence against educators in your school division and any potential prevention measures that can be used. ESPs can also advocate for workplace safety surveys and assessments that support greater professional development and effective policies. So some of the types of data around workplace violence and violence against educators that your school division may be collecting could involve your workers' compensation data, also your workplace injury incident reports. Sometimes there's summaries available, risk assessments, and workplace safety surveys. So definitely you would want to check with your human resources department or your administrative team to determine if this type of data is available and how you can access it. Incident reports can also help you identify any risk factors and lend to effective professional development policies. So, for example, if there's data on workplace injuries on the school bus, this can really help our school bus drivers and support professionals advocate for specific types of training and even maybe safety equipment and measures as well. ESPs can also use the data that is and advocate for data that is very specific to their work. And so sometimes overall district data doesn't always specify work environments or work roles, but by looking at other pieces of data, this could be an advocacy point around asking for more specific data collection that could provide you with more effective training and protections as well. Next slide. So when we talk about incident reporting, I'm sure many of us have filled out reports in schools, whether it's been disciplinary referrals or incident reports for students or for ourselves, or even workers' compensation paperwork. And it can be very cumbersome and have lots of different pieces of information that you have to fill out. So as I mentioned, in our policy and procedures discussion, it's important that we know the process for reporting workplace violence incidents. So being aware of those different definitions that are required for the information that you need to fill out the report, also where to access the report forms, what supporting information is needed for the report, and who or what department you should submit it to. All of these things are important because oftentimes when there's not really great follow through with incident reporting, it's sometimes they will, officials will cite that there's missing pieces of information, or delays can be called. You can have delays when things are submitted to the incorrect department or person. And so also when you're filling out incident reports, you want to really make sure that you include not only just the details, but things that involve what occurred before and after the immediate event. And this helps to provide context because when you can describe any events that happened before the incident of violence and after, it can give information that can provide a better understanding of the incident and the intent of the act. And all of those things are being very important for those officials reviewing reports and making those decisions. So your incidents reports should also include things like a description of the incident, and it should really give as much detail as possible. I know writing often, especially if you have to handwrite these things, can be very tedious, but if you can give as much detail as possible, the better. So you want to make sure you also specify times and location. Make sure that you get the correct names and the parties involved and document any witnesses that may have been present. Also, when you're describing any actions or injuries, you want to note the nature and the severity. Also, pay attention to noting the level of force that was used and the depth of wounds if there were any bleeding. So we want to be it can sound maybe a little gory, but you do want to be very specific about the injury because that could be very important details later, especially if you have ongoing injuries. And these details are also important to those assessing the incident. And the more details you can provide, the better. And so we don't want to forget details as time goes by. So the soon as you can record those items and write notes to yourself and the various descriptors, the better, because we don't want to leave out very crucial details that could be vital. Next slide. And lastly, like our data collection, incident reporting is key to providing response and prevention. So the data that's collected from your reports can also help determine those training needs, risk factors, and needs for security measures. I've been involved in several cases where incident reports and the data that was provided in various details in either very specific reports or the reports as a whole, from a specific classroom or school, have really helped administrators to make decisions about, purchasing protective equipment or changing schedules for staff, and even providing additional supports in various educational environments for students. So the details are very important. Next slide. So one major a critical consideration when we talk about injuries is how we seek care and monitor our injuries. So injuries can range in severity. It can be superficial or bruising. You could have a pulled muscle or even nerve damage, and even some serious wounds like punctures and cuts. So sometimes we don't believe that an injury is serious enough to warrant reporting, or we'll think, oh, it'll heal quickly. I just got a scratch or a pinch and it'll be okay. But as we've discussed, injury reporting supports not only the larger need for resources through data collection, but more importantly, your own personal wellness. And so it's important to report all injuries, even if you don't feel like you need immediate care or they're not just minor injuries that you won't have any, medical follow-up with. So injuries such as small cuts that could become infected, they could also lead to ongoing injuries or skin damage. Other injuries from getting pinched or scratched or bumped and shoved can also cause pain and minor injury that could worsen over days and weeks. And could require medical attention later on down the road. And so this is really why you should report any type of injury, even if you don't seek immediate care, because you never know when you may need care or if that injury worsens. So remember to also inform your supervisor. So as well of everything that's going on. Even if you're not turning the report into your supervisor directly, like I said before, some of the incident reports around workplace violence may go to your health and safety team or to your nurse, your school nurse. And so sometimes your administrator or supervisor may not be immediately aware that you've sustained an injury. Also, if protective equipment or gear is used, so for example, if you're working in an environment that requires you to wear bite sleeves or leg guards, you definitely want to make sure that you utilize any of the required equipment to protect yourself from injury. Also, there's safety protocols. If there are safety protocols that you have to follow as well, you want to make sure that you follow those for your own safety. And also, during an incident investigation, these things may be asked and they may follow up on whether or not you were utilizing protective gear and protocols as well. And also, if you sustain injury or multiple injuries, it's important to advocate for the need of protective equipment. So you can always discuss the issue with your administrator. There's nothing wrong with asking, and your incident report data can also support the need for protective equipment or gear or even protocols. Also, when you keep record of your chronic injuries and copies of your injury and incident reports, it's also a way for you to add to your medical history and health reporting. So any monitoring to changes of injuries, you can report them to your doctors and make that a part of your treatment plan. So if you're under doctor's care, this can be definitely vital for establishing your history of injury, which again is necessary for a treatment plan. So also, access to any resources through assistance programs and medical professionals that support your social and emotional wellness are also very, very important when you're seeking care and monitoring your injuries. Sustaining an injury, whether it's during a violent act or not, can have an emotional and psychological toll. And so we want to make sure we take care of our social and emotional wellness as well. And so we've discussed a lot of these different practices that you can use to support your personal injury response and prevention, but also the other piece to that is how do you support prevention and response that creates safe school culture? And it also fosters awareness of the issue and the different proactive measures that we can use. And so first we want to make sure that we are taking care of knowing and recognizing procedures and policies that protect us as educators, especially in our specific roles as ESPs, but then also what can we do to support the environment? And so as I turn it now over to Dr. Russ, she will also discuss prevention and response strategies that you can use to build safe culture. Next slide.
Thank you. So when we talk about prevention and response, current research indicates that factors such as mental health access, toxic stress, school culture, and community issues are contributing factors to incidents of aggression and physical violence against educators. Prevention and response measures that support positive student communication, relationship building, trauma-informed practices and restorative justice practices are recommended for addressing underlying factors. Many of these things are introduced at your schools at the beginning of the school year when there are various meetings. And if you're unable to attend, a lot of times they do have handouts and other references, but these are things that really impact our day-to-day life. We want to operate in regards to how we respond. We want to operate with prevention versus response. So instead of repairing, what are some things that we can do to advocate for ourselves, to learn more about the culture, to learn how to communicate properly with the community members, with the students, with the other faculty and staff, to create that. To make sure we're not creating that toxic stress and reinforcing that positive school culture. Next slide. So here are some things that contribute to the things that we can do to be proactive. So the power of building relationships, it does not just automatically happen. It takes work, it takes time, but it has to start somewhere. And many of us, we do it every day with some of the things that how we communicate with our students. So building healthy relationships with students and community is a vital strategy for fostering violence prevention. It's a good idea to partner with your administration, with the teachers, with the students, parents, and even community organizations. Um, if you are building those relationships, you will have a watchful eye of different things that are happening so that you can, as we said before, report different things that are happening. And also, you can also have healthy conversations and build healthy relationships with those students and with those teachers so that when they know that you are having a conversation with them, that you are sincere. And it's going to help strengthen the culture. Next slide. Some positive communication strategies consist of effective communication. So you can strengthen relationships and build rapport. Um, Many of us, I know that with a lot of the bus drivers that I deal with, they are always saying good morning, or they have code communications that they use with the kids when they're getting on their bus. And they have different things that they can do. So when they look into the eyes of students, they can know, if that student is getting on the bus and having a great day or not. And they're able to inform an administrator or a teacher on duty, or if there was a parent that they were communicating with, and the parent has indicated that that their child might be feeling a little off, or that there's something that's happened, or something happened on the way to the bus stop with some other students, or maybe someone received a phone call or something to that nature. But those positive communication strategies help build that rapport. And then you can encourage open dialogue with those students and with those adults, open dialogue that is also healthy. I reinforce that healthy part because many of the students, they communicate with social media, and they have to be taught by all of us as adults what is a healthy dialogue, what is the proper way to communicate with adults specifically. And you can also build safe and supportive school environments by doing this. In addition to high fives, giving a pound, there's also different things that you can do just to let those students know that you want them to have a great day, or at the end of the day that you care about what happened in their school day during their school time. And it's an indicator that helps protect all of us because it's helping everyone to have an open mind and open communication so that we're able to kind of learn each other and strengthen that relationship component. Next slide. Using positive behavior support strategies. Behavior support strategies can be used across all school environments. And this is important to remember because we communicate with different students at different times. Whether we are working in the lunchroom, whether we are working in operations, cleaning rooms, we see different things, and we are able to catch students doing what's right. And when students know that anyone on campus can catch them doing what's right and reinforce that positive behavior, that's another opportunity to strengthen the culture of that site. ESPs can implement support programs and strategies on the bus, in the cafeteria, in the halls, and in the classroom. You can also partner with what the school is actually doing and not recreate the wheel and do something on your own. If the school is giving out little bucks, or there's certain things that they do, maybe there's a link that they have you use if there's a student that's in the cafeteria that's helping to pick up trash, or helping every day, to wipe off the tables without even being asked, or monitoring students' behavior, helping to make sure students are using the proper language, or giving extra compliments, to brighten someone's day. Positive behavior supports also help to build relationships and provide social and emotional supports for students. Next slide. One of the websites that is a wonderful reference is this PBIS. It's Positive Behavior Intervention Systems. So using little bucks or any other revenue on campus or on the bus or in the cafeteria or around campus, those are what we call PBIS rewards. And there's ways to get started. There's different ways that you can research resources, even make suggestions to some of the sites where you serve, if you haven't done so already. And this is a wonderful website, pbisrewards.com. They have a plethora of free resources that you can use or you can suggest at your site to work together to strengthen the school culture, because that positive behavior intervention system, that positive behavior engagement on campus helps to strengthen the school culture, and is a wonderful way to build relationships, because it shows the students that not only are the teachers and administrators reinforcing positive behavior, but everyone is on board with reinforcing positive behavior. Next slide. So when it comes to advocating for support and resources, make sure that you have access to professional development opportunities in your school division. Ask about employee assistance programs, EAP, to support educator wellness. Ensure that you have access to incident report forms readily available to the procedures for incident reporting and workers' compensation programs. Also, make sure that you review school district occupation safety data, support advocacy for support and resources. Make sure you know where these things are located. Make sure you know how to readily access them, so that when something happens, you're not having to scramble and reach for it or ask around. Make sure you are familiar with it. It's a good idea to make sure that you're familiar with these things to equip yourself with knowledge in advance. Next slide. And so also we have an action plan that you can follow that you will get a copy of. This action plan gives you an opportunity to write down, things that you are going to do for your next steps. What are the actions that you could take to learn more about the workplace violence? What supports or resources are available in your school, in your district? What are the workplace violence forms? Where are the workplace violence forms located? And who could you contact if you need support? And then other materials that it's when we write that's commitment on paper. It's a good idea to jot these things down so that if you need to request them, as I said before, and utilize them, you have them readily available, but you've already given thought to what you want to do next. Next slide, please.
And so we want to thank you tonight as well. And if you have any suggestions for people who may be new to, engaging with their workplace violence policies and programs, please, drop them in the chat. What are some of the things that you do or the people that you contact um, when it comes to incident reporting and when you need to know what policies and procedures are in your school divisions? Because there are a lot of great suggestions in the chat tonight. And so please feel free to share any of the things that you'd like to do to keep yourself abreast on district policies and forms. And I see one comment. So what if your district doesn't have a workplace form? Well, that's a great question, right? So, who are some people in your action plan that you could note? Who would be some people that you could possibly ask about workplace violence forms, or what types of forms that you could use if they don't have forms or documents specific to workplace violence? They may say it's just for you to use the regular incident reporting and so on. Right. So it could be your principal or admin or HR. Right. So thank you for those suggestions. And so, um, as Dr. Russ mentioned, our planning form, like she said, when you commit these things to writing and have time to think about them and when you get a moment, it's a good way to kind of put these things in the forefront of your mind and think about how you can ask for the information, but also how you can advocate around getting more information and more access to processes and professional development in the areas of workplace violence. And so we also have put a list of resources in our resource folder that we'll share with you later on this evening. This is a very critical issue, and there's some really great work out there amongst states such as Maryland and New York that are working to address this issue through statewide legislation and the implementation of effective practices for incident reporting, professional development, and student supports. And then across our organization here at NEA, our staff continues to promote these best practices, for safe school culture and any underlying violence issues by, providing information on strategies and psychological safety and educator wellness and policies as well. And so, next slide. I will turn it over to Jessica for questions.
So we have officially reached the question and answer portion of tonight's session. Thank you so much, Crystal and Dr. Russ, for that great presentation. I know that there were some questions that were coming in the chat. If you have not already had received an answer to that question, we invite you to please type it into the Q&A feature, because we will start answering questions as they are listed in the order in the Q&A feature. And so we will be on for a few more minutes to answer those questions, and then we will segue into our closeout where you will be able to download the materials. So Crystal, feel free to get started with the Q&A. And you have to unmute, you're on mute.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right. I see a couple of questions in the Q&A. And so there was several questions as well about copies of the slides, and we'll share a link with you after this that will provide you with the resources we discussed today and the slides. So one question that we have is, one attendee, thank you, Dr. Russ, for the PBIS tools. So where are the protections for substitutes in the actions organized, as the trend towards services rarely include them? That's a great question. Oftentimes, unfortunately, our substitute paraeducators or even teachers or substitutes in any educator role don't always get those trainings that they need, especially if they are substitutes that are frequently used and they come back to our schools and have rapport and relationships with our students. They definitely need training. And so that's also something that substitutes can advocate for as well. I know that there's some school divisions that do a great job of including behavior support strategies in substitute training, but a lot of substitute onboarding, unfortunately, is around, documentation and processes for human resources. But that's a great question. Another question we have is looking past COVID-19 exposures in schools, where are the critical issues when staff get sick, when students and parents use their rights to expose teachers to releasing infections without concerns for teachers' rights? Yes, again, that's a great question. When we talk about your rights to exposure, it just like with workplace violence, is very important that you know, become familiar with the processes and protocols around school health and safety that have to do with the spread of infectious disease if you believe that you're being chronically exposed as well. So also, we had some other questions here. Where can I find a sample of workplace violence policies and prevention programs? Like I mentioned earlier, the state of New York has a very comprehensive program that includes workplace violence policy that is specific to educators and policy collaboration between in New York. They have a great policy collaboration between their state Department of Labor and their Department of Education. And so their program includes things like training on reporting and data collection, as well as positive behavior supports and de-escalation strategies, and understanding, the importance of when you are to use the various behavior supports. And so that resource is also included the resource sheet that we'll share with you later. And our next question, should ESPs that are not in the classroom advocate for training and positive behavior supports? And where is a good place to start to find training? Dr. Russ, is this?
Yeah, well, I was going to say,
Fine.
so many districts are different. You always want to start with the administration. To be perfectly honest, administrators love, especially the principal, they love when someone is advocating for themselves and inquiring to seek more information about different practices that will help whatever it is that you are doing on campus. And so we've even at our district and at our sites, we've even done PBIS training for the bus drivers. So that's an example. After the bus driver said, "Hey, we're looking for something, to help us reinforce positive behavior," and it was brought to the attention that we're already doing it on our site, but we can extend this to the bus drivers as well. We also found in other districts as well. I'm in Hillsborough County in Florida. What we do is when we are reinforcing things, like we have something called restorative practices. When we have enough people who inquire about it, then we hold a professional development where people have an opportunity. It's voluntary. If there's funds and it's paid, but a lot of these things are not always paid. But once someone inquires, then the principal usually takes the opportunity to capitalize on that and either direct you to the proper resources or conduct it on site themselves, have someone to conduct it on site themselves.
Thank you, Dr. Russ. Another question that also came up is who is responsible for personal property damage during an incident of violence? And so that can definitely be a tricky question. And again, it depends on your policies and procedures. You definitely want to check with your school policies, because some policies, explicitly state or note that, they're not responsible for personal property damage. Also, but a lot of times you may see, like in workers' comp coverage, that if your glasses or medical equipment that may be on your person is damaged, it could be covered under workers' compensation. But then again, those policies, they differ from state to state. And so you definitely want to check, what the workers' compensation coverage is. And then also, sometimes having conversations with administrators and seeing if there are funds or policies that cover damage, especially if it's an incident where you're injured while you're supporting students. So sometimes there are things available that are not, widely known about where they can help support, say like damage to eyeglasses and things of that nature. Also, another question was, do we offer de-escalation training? So there are various types of de-escalation training programs out there. NEA doesn't necessarily promote or subscribe to any of them, but the thing about de-escalation training, especially if you're talking about physical de-escalation training, so most of the training programs like crisis prevention, intervention, and also like handle with care or MANT training, they have a verbal and a physical component. We really support the use of verbal de-escalation. Physical de-escalation, you would have to be specifically trained in whatever your school subscribes to, because there could be liability attached to that. And more and more schools, divisions, and states are moving away from using a lot of physical de-escalation strategies and moving more towards, preventive measures that really lie in verbal de-escalation. And so, with that being said, this past spring, Jason Frazier from Delaware did a webinar for us, and those resources will probably be available soon, if not already, in our ESPLN network repository. And he did a great training on using verbal de-escalation. And so I think that pretty much concludes us for the questions, as we have about 5 more minutes, and I will pass it back to Jessica to close us out with the last housekeeping items. And again, thank you all for coming.
To request a general session-specific certificate of completion as a participant of recorded sessions, please send your request by emailing espqweb@nea.org. All requests must include the session title and the on-screen certificate of completion code. Session certificates will not be provided if the viewer code is not included in the email request. Note, due to limitations in our ability to track attendance after live sessions, requests for personalized certificates will only be provided for participants of live webinars whose attendance can be verified. The certificate received for viewing recorded sessions will be session specific, but will not include personalized names. On behalf of the Center for Professional Excellence in Student Learning's NEA ESP Quality Department, I would like to once again thank our presenters, Crystal Fox and Dr. Russ, for joining us this evening, and thank you all for your participation. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and good night from the NEA ESP Quality Department.